Prop 20, voting yes on Prop 20. This one's written very, very deceptively, and I think for specific reasons. And I will get into those specific reasons after we read the summary. Then we're going to read the sections of the proposed law, and then I'm going to read a different bill that has been passed, which is why I feel that this was written in a specific way. So Prop 20 restricts parole for certain offenses considered to be non-violent, authorizes felony sentences for certain offenses currently treated as misdemeanors, limits access to parole programs established for non-violent offenders who have completed the full term of their primary offense by eliminating eligibility for certain offenses. So, that's the brief summary. Now, let's get into some of the sections of the proposed law. So the section title, "This Act shall be known and may be cited as the Reducing Crime and Keeping California Safe Act." I hate the way they title these laws because it makes it sound like the Reducing Crime and Keeping California Safe Act. It's like you can't really reduce crime, like you can increase punishment, but you don't really reduce crime, at least not in this way. I'm still voting yes, but this is not the way you reduce crime. Anyway, so it says reform the parole system so violent felons are not released early from prison, strengthen oversight of post-release community supervision, and tighten penalties for violations of terms of post-release community supervision. Reform theft laws to restore accountability for serial thieves and organized theft rings, and expand DNA collection from persons convicted of drug, theft, and domestic violence-related crimes to help solve violent crimes and exonerate the innocent. Recent changes to the parole laws allowed the early release of dangerous criminals, but the law's failure to define certain crimes as violent. These changes allowed individuals convicted of sex trafficking of children, rape of an unconscious person, felony assault with a deadly weapon, battery on a police officer or firefighter, and felony domestic violence to be considered non-violent offenders. I mean, it's crazy to think that those are recent changes to parole laws to consider those things as non-violent. And here's another disturbing bill that was passed through the Senate by this guy whose name was, believe it or not, this guy's name is Scott Wiener. And he implemented this new sex offenders registration legislation, which the existing law, the Sex Offender Registration Act, requires a person convicted of one of certain crimes as specified to register with law enforcement as a sex offender while residing in California or while attending school or working in California as specified. A willing failure to register as required by the Act as a misdemeanor or felony, depending on the underlying offense. This bill would exempt from mandatory registration under the Act of a person convicted of certain offenses involving minors if the person is not more than 10 years older than the minor, and if that offense is the only one requiring a person to register. So basically, you're not going to have to register as a sex offender if you have sex with someone who's 10 years younger than you. Now, I will admit, because the way I first heard about this, I just thought, like, if you're 19, you could fuck a 9-year-old or something like that. But the cap is at 14 years old. But 14 is still pretty young. 16 seems like a little bit more reasonable. But still, it's like, circumstances are also should be taken into consideration. Like, for example, if you're in high school, you're 17 years old and you start dating someone that's 15. By the time you're 18, that person's going to be 16. And that would be considered, you would literally be considered like having relations with a minor. When it's like, if you were in high school with this person when you first started dating, that's a tricky scenario. So there's certain things that are a little tricky, I'll admit. It's a very, very touchy topic. I'm sure there's people who are watching right now that are like, it's probably triggering you. But anyways, that's why I'm voting yes on 20, because they're introducing bills into the Senate that's going to reduce this registration of sex offenders by being 10 years. You can be 10 years older than the person. If you're 17 and you hook up with someone who's 27, that's a little bit different than someone who's 18 and was dating someone who was 16, or who's dating someone who's 16, but they both started dating when they were both technically minors. So it's like very complex issue. But the fact that they're introducing that bill, and this guy Scott Wiener is I was watching an interview with him. It's hard to watch this guy talk because he just gives off a creepy, predatory vibe. So when I seen that this bill is being introduced and then I see this ballot, I'm like, okay, I'm just going to vote yes. because we shouldn't be just letting people out who are sex offenders. So vote yes on Prop 20. It's a very conflicting bill. Some of these things are not easy to decide on. So I'm voting yes. That's all I got to say.